have something special. You have greatness in you. Hello, I'm Les Brown, and I have a special guest, Dr. Angela Kenzslowe. And she is an individual that provides a quality of service that help people to move themselves from where they are to where they want to go. I'm so excited to be able to share a few moments with her. Hello, how are you, Dr. Angela?
I am so wonderful, Mr. Les Brown. It is so beautiful to be back in your presence. Thank you so much for
Thank
this
you.
wonderful
Thank
opportunity.
you.
Be
Now,
with
who are the people that you work with and feel that your message and your experience and your wisdom is for?
So when I'm looking at a systemic level, I work with corporations and businesses. Corporations hire me to help with the well-being of their employees. So we help with the soft skills, so that way that the hard skills can thrive and people are able to feel better when it comes to their mental health, with their well-being. And then that way that bottom line of the company is able to still increase by being able to retain those employees rather than losing them because things just aren't well with their individual well-being.
Okay, now, Dr. Angela, I want you to distinguish the difference between hard skills and soft skills.
Excellent. So I'll start with hard skills. Hard skills
Mhm.
are what you've hired somebody to do. So if they're a technician, if they're, say, a signal or communications person, if they're an engineer, if they're an attorney, they're producing some type of product or service for your company. The soft skills, however, are how do we interact with one another? How do we interact with people who are within the organization, but they're different than me? We all have diverse backgrounds. We come from different parts of the country. We have different ethnic backgrounds. We have different educational backgrounds. And so when we're different from one another, sometimes it can be challenging to understand what's the best way to interact with this person on an interpersonal level. Then, of course, we all have stresses and challenges in our personal lives that don't stop just because we're at work. So when we're
Yeah.
at work, how do we support people with their mental well-being? How does someone who works for you come and say, right now I'm just really stressed and life is really hard and I need to be able to focus a little bit better, but I just need a break for about 30 minutes to step outside and feel as though they can trust to do that with their management.
When you think about your life, when was it that you decided, you know what, Angela, you're going to take your life in this direction to help people to develop the skills that they need to conduct and manage their lives personally, their family life, and their professional life? When was it, and what was the experience that you decided this is the purpose and meaning of my life?
That is such a great question. I think I was born for this, and that sounds very cliche, but the reason
No,
why
it doesn't. No, I understand that because I was born to speak.
mm, it's
Yes.
when people continuously come, I'll speak for myself rather than saying for you. So people throughout my life have always come to me for help, for solace, for an open ear. And I recognize that without being properly trained by getting my doctoral degree in psychology
Mhm.
and becoming a psychologist, that I could give bad information or bad understanding of what I think is the right thing to do without really having that clinical training to know, okay, if I say this, if I do this, or maybe they're acting this way because of this, rather than just using my own anecdotal or personal experiences. That's the reason why I got the professional training. But to answer your question in a better, more succinct way, I was born this way, and my empathy just, I believe, comes across and people are drawn to me.
When you think about where people are now during the pandemic, there's a level of anxiety and
Mhm.
fear that we feel just swapping air with people can cost us our lives. And unexpected violence, having to drive around a service stations 3 or 4 times to say to yourself, I think it's safe to go there to pump your gas, or going to some place that's crowded and asking yourself, is it safe? Or we have to prep our kids to go to school, not for fire drills, but in the event a shooter comes into the school. From the mindset, your clinical skills, how is that playing out in our behavior and how we interact with each other personally and professionally? To what extent is that impacting our behavior?
That is a very heavy question. So our brains are set up for us to always seek danger. That's just how we are. And so when we're looking, when our brains are trying to figure out, is this dangerous? Is this dangerous? Is this dangerous? Our fight or flight system engages. And that's where anxiety, stress, post-traumatic symptoms start to display. And just like you've mentioned, we've had the COVID pandemic. We have all these social issues. We have politics where we're becoming polarized as a nation. We've just had an election, and our sympathetic nervous systems are just on overdrive because we have these worried thoughts about the future of not knowing, am I going to be in danger or am I safe? And just like you mentioned, going to the gas station, can I get out of my car and pump my gas right now? And, our levels are going up, our cortisol. So what we're finding is, because of all of this, is people have systemically, we're finding that everyone is just tired. Our bodies are being overexpended. Our attitudes might seem a little bit more short, our fuses, right? Because we're not built to constantly, continuously have all of these fears coming at us in every direction. And so we're seeing that mental health is really starting to take a decline. But the good thing is that organizations, businesses, governments, families, we're really looking at mental health and trying to figure out, how can we focus more on well-being? What can we do to really take the stigma away? Because at this point, everybody's being touched by something that's negative when it comes to our mental health. And we all now, because we're in this collectively, can have a better understanding and have more empathy towards one another to be able to be a little bit more helpful. So I think for people such as myself who work in mental health, it's a lot of work right now, but because the stigma is lessening, it makes it easier to have the conversations such as this.
When you think about the cost of living, the increased cost of food, I just read a study yesterday that people who are working two jobs, many of them are going to blood banks to sell their blood to be able to put food on the table or pay for their utilities or buy gas. What role does that play in affecting us psychically?
That actually is a major role. So we have what we call Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what you're talking
Yeah.
about is what's on that bottom level, our basic needs: food, shelter, safety. And so if my food is not secure, my shelter isn't secure, and my safety isn't secure, all those other things doesn't really matter. Worrying really about, am I anxious or am I stressed, does not matter if my basic needs aren't met.
How is it affecting marriages?
So if needs aren't met, it could be negative, but it can also be a point where couples come together. So it really depends on the strength of what that marriage was prior to the challenge. So was it already rocky to where now this is just another thing that's coming at us? Or have things always been, for the most part, great, and we sit on the table, on this side of the table together, and we go after the issue? Or are we already on opposite sides of the table to where we're combative with one another? It really depends on the overall health of that marriage.
There have been some studies saying that we need to build communities. People need to be in a community of relationships with other people rather than try and do this thing solo. Talk to us about how important for people to build a community of collaborative, achievement-driven, supportive relationships with family members, with friends, and people they work with.
Yeah, we're social people. We're social beings. And because since the pandemic, it's more natural now to work from home. It's more natural for us to be isolated from others. And that's, again, where we're starting to see mental health kind of take that dip, right, of isolation. And so now more than ever, it's so much more important that we're intentional with our social relationships, because we're not having the water cooler conversations that we would typically have at work. Right? You're sitting at home, the dog might be doing something, or your kid might be yelling, right? Or they're at school now. So we're even more isolated because, even our children are back in school. But that typical social interaction that we have with our colleagues, you know, we might get a text or an email, but we're not having that one-on-one interpersonal in-person interaction. So being intentional and really seeking out social interaction is imperative. So that way we can not be so isolated and not have that negative effect on our mental health.
People who are just tuning in and perhaps came in the middle of this conversation, share with them your full name, how they can get in touch with you, and the services that you provide for them and their family members and the people that they work with.
Okay, so my name is Dr. Angela Kenzslowe. You can reach me at my website, drangelaKenzslowe.com. So drangelaKenzslowe.com. You'll be able to see it down there. So I'll make sure that we have that there. And companies and businesses hire me to help them with their employees' soft skills, so that way their hard skills can thrive, and we are able to improve the well-being of each individual within the organization, so that the cultural well-being of the organization improves, and that way we keep the bottom line keep going up. As we make positive impacts on employees, of course, there's that trickle down when it comes to their families and their social circles.
Final thought that you'd like to share with people to hold on to for their personal life, their personal relationships, family relationships, and their business or the place where they're employed? What would you like to tell them? And, you know, from some people say from a spiritual perspective, this too shall pass. It has not come to stay, it has come to pass. What would you say?
Grace. Give yourself grace. Give people in your life grace, and give organizations, whether you work for them or if you're a customer, grace. You know, we go to the local coffee
What do you
shop.
mean by grace? What do you mean? What does that look like?
So what I mean by grace is more of proactive forgiveness. So
I
again,
like that definition.
thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
So again, if we
Yeah.
go to a local coffee shop and they're understaffed, and now rather than it taking 5 minutes to get our favorite coffee, it might take 10. And so rather than becoming irritated because, oh my gosh, it's taken 10 minutes to get my coffee, provide some grace. These people actually showed up for work. They showed up. You're here, they're there. Just breathe, take it in. As you mentioned, this too shall pass. We're going to get things back in order. But until then, forgive yourself, forgive others, just through grace. Just through grace.
Dr. Angela, that is so heartfelt. Thank you so much. And I'm sure people will be reaching out to you. Continue to do the great you're doing.
Thank you so much, Mr. Les Brown. I appreciate you so much.
And I appreciate you as well. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.